You're listening to Opening the Harp Chakra, the podcast, bringing you beautiful, healing, magical harp music and talking to the artists that create it. Today's guest plays the Wire Strung Harp. She teaches it, performs it. She's an author. She's written books about the Wire Strung Harp. She also writes a column for the Folk Harp Journal. Her name is Cynthia Cathcart, and I'm so pleased to have her on the program today. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, Jay. Thanks
Welcome.
for having me. Thank
you.
I'm
so glad to have you. I've been a big fan of your music for a long time, and it's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, could we start with you telling us about how you got started playing the Wire Strung Harp?
Well, I am a pianist by training and been making my living as a pianist, teaching for more than 20 years. And my stepfather was a piper, and he developed a heart condition and couldn't do the bagpipes anymore. He didn't have the stamina for that. Mm-hmm. So my mother had gone out and bought him a Scottish harp so he could play his Scottish music. And that harp was strung with wire. Well, sadly, my stepfather died like a couple of years later. I never heard him play the harp. But the family decided that since I was the musician in the family, I should inherit his harp. So my brother put the harp in the back of his pickup truck and drove it to my house, covered with plastic because it didn't have a cover case. And I was like, guys, look, I know I'm the musician in the family, but I don't play the harp. So I took this instrument and it was pretty. So I put it in the corner of my room with a piece of plastic over it and just left it there. And I didn't touch it. And then one day I was taking a nap and I had this dream. I dreamt that I was in this beautiful green place, smooth hills, and I was looking for something. And I was walking up this hill looking for this thing, and I heard these bells ringing, and I thought, that's it. That's it. That's what I want to find. And as I neared the crest of the hill and I was going to find out what it was, I realized that this ringing bells was actually happening in the room I was sleeping in. So I forced myself awake to realize that my 3-year-old son had walked into the room, taken the plastic off the harp, and was plucking the strings.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, okay, I've got to play this.
That's so cool. Wow.
True story.
Wow.
And so I took the harp to the local shop and said, help me put, a couple of strings had broken.
Mm-hmm.
But I started teaching myself how to play it.
So you're essentially self-taught.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's play some of your music. We have The Mist-Covered Mountains, and I understand this has a connection to you from a story from your grandfather.
Yes, my grandfather, Stuart Ogilvie, loved to tell us stories and make music with us. And this particular tune, the story he always told with it was that it was a battle being fought between two sides, and the wrong side won. And they couldn't give up. And so they continued to fight. So even today, if you go to those hills where those mountains where this battle happened, you can still hear them fighting. They never gave up.
It's from a CD called Alchemy of a Rose. Cynthia Cathcart, The Mist-Covered Mountains, and The Wrong Side, The Right Side, The Wrong Side One. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think it's interesting because we usually think of the wrong side losing. But, who determines what the right side or the wrong side is? And you don't, sometimes one side isn't clearly wrong. And yet, my grandfather saying the wrong side won, it makes you think. It makes you, it's music. It's a story that makes you stop and question your little assumptions about, what's right and what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of, it's music to teach you a lesson.
Right. Make you think.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the laments. And you gave me a beautiful lament. This is the elegy on Rob Roy McGregor. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Well, I think, we talk about music for a purpose. I talk a lot about music having purpose, and laments are a profound example. People today, we often think of music as either a background accompaniment to our daily work or something to keep us occupied on our commutes. Or, sometimes you'll, oh, well, there's love songs, right? But there are songs of occupation, as in what is your job? So a lullaby would be, do we...
That's a woodpecker,
That's
right?
a woodpecker.
I heard your dog too, but that's fine. They can be part of the podcast. Okay. It's totally okay with me if it's okay with you.
It's okay with me. I live in a very heavily wooded area, and this is my friendly neighborhood woodpecker.
Okay, well that's just fine.
But to go back, there's music of protest. There's music preparation for the battle, which was a pretty special piece of music that the harp would be part of. Worship, dances, yeah. I mean, but it's music that is purposeful, like a lament, would bring out the feelings of the people present, help them come to terms with their grief, and it's a pretty important purpose.
So that's a very beautiful lament, elegy on Rob Roy McGregor. I say beautiful because I love laments. You talked about music for a purpose. And for me, a sad song, especially if you're feeling sad, is such a great way to channel that music into, or channel that sadness rather into something else.
Yeah.
And,
Bring you to the next level of the grieving process in this situation.
So, yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful. Yeah. So you're a teacher. You teach, and you've actually written books about the wire strung harp and teaching for it.
Yes, one of my books is a pathway. It's a primer for the wire strung harp to help people learn to play it. Because when I got my first harp, there was really no primer. Nothing that took you from the very basics through playing it. So I kind of felt like I wanted to write this book.
So when you approach wire strung harp for people, I know there are certain techniques in all instruments. There are certain techniques that people want you to use, but there's also all sorts of variations depending on the individual. Where do you fall in that?
Well, especially on the wire strung harp, because there's no method. It's like if you're playing the piano, there are different method books, but they all pretty much teach the same thing. It's pretty well accepted that this is how you play a scale, for example. But on the wire strung harp, we don't have that really. It's really just, we have some hints and ideas on how the historical harpers played, but it's open to a lot of interpretation. I had someone not too long ago say, I want to learn how to play your method. And I was like, well, no, it's not my method. It's just the way I play. And it answers to the kind of harp I have and the kind of music I want to play. As like earlier today, just today, I had someone contact me, wanted information on the ancient Gallic harp. And I was like, well, it's not just ancient, and we can do things today that maybe the ancients didn't do, or we can't prove that they did, but it's all in service to making the music. And as a teacher, that's what I want to do. I want to bring people to this instrument who have been drawn by its beauty. The resonance is just stunning on this, and there's nothing else like it. And, depending on, if they want to play very early music, I love it. The last concert I played before the pandemic was medieval Irish chant. But I also play, traditional American music and a couple of bluegrass tunes, and whatever will fit. That's what I want to help people play. And depending on what you're going to play, you're going to use different techniques. And
so you're basically helping people find their own method to what they want to do, right?
Yeah, I think so. And if you can take some parts of my method and it helps you, that's wonderful. But you can do some of it or none of it, or make up your own.
Because I started with wire harp myself, and I still have 2 wire harps, and I love to play wire harp. But when I first started, it was this: what do I do? Right hand up, left hand up, right shoulder, left shoulder, and I basically experimented till I found what worked for me. Same with my hand technique; it's not exactly what other people do, but it became my method, and it's worked for me, and I guess that's what's important for me.
Yeah. And what you might want to do is take a look and see what other people do and say, oh, wait a minute, you can do that? That's going to be great. That's going to help me play this part of what I do. But yeah, it's like I get people that will say, oh, I can't play wire strung harp because I can't grow my nails. And I'm like, no. Of the 10 wire strung harpers that were at Belfast when Edward Bunting was collecting music in 1792, only one of them played with fingernails. So it's a lot more open than you might think.
Yeah. Well, it's also like classical guitar. Some people want you to have nails, but a lot of people don't. The pads of the fingers have their own unique sound too, which is different than the nails. So I think it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I'd love to listen to some more of your music. This is Miss Proud's Reel. from the CD Alchemy of a Rose. That is Miss Proud's reel from our wonderful guest on the podcast today, Cynthia Cathcart. It is so nice. We have another of your tunes here. This is the Chanter's tune from Bunting. Can you introduce this for us?
Yeah, well, Edward Bunting, without him, we wouldn't have many of the pieces of music we have from the Wire Strung Harp. They, it's kind of a long story. I don't want to go into too many details, but he was hired as an 18-year-old. Maybe he was 19. He was an organist, and he was invited to write down the music that was being played at a gathering of wire-strung harpers in Belfast in 1792. And it became a passion in his life. He continued to collect and publish some of this music. Yeah, I mean, without Bunting, that music, and there's music in the manuscripts that have survived from him that he never published. So there's lots there, and Chanter's tune is one of these pieces.
So that was the Chanter's Tune, Cynthia Cathcart, beautiful wire-strung harp music for you.
Thank you.
So, wirestrungharp.com.
Yes.
That's a place to go and find out more about wire-strung harp.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit there. Wirestrungharp.com, I guess it may have been 10 years ago now. I was talking with a musicologist in Scotland and a harp maker in Ireland, and we were lamenting there was a lot of, and there still is, information on the internet that's kind of airy-fairy, that is not quite accurate or is, mythological, and we felt that there needed to be a place you could go where you knew the information was documented. I mean, we have, citations, and so we were like, wow, it's too bad nobody's making this website. And I finally said, guys, I think it's us. I think we're the ones that should be making this website. So I learned how to code and we pulled together. And another part of it was I really wanted to have a place where I could go, where I could easily look up and say, okay, how many strings were on the Queen Mary harp? How many strings were on the Lamont harp? A place where I could go and get the measurements. And so that's where we started, was that part of the website that I wanted, where each wire-strung harp that survived, and even some that haven't, we just have documentation of. There's a table for each one, and the tables are all set up the same way, so you can go on there and find that information. But we've now, at this point, we've got history, we've got a library that's got music in it, the Bunting collections are in there. We've got spreadsheets and calculators to figure out what size strings to put on your harp. We've got a timeline of the revival and a timeline of old news that overlap each other, which I think is wonderful. That the harp never did go extinct. So I'm very proud of it. It was a lot of work, and it's held up well. So.
And you're also writing a column for the Folk Harp Journal, every issue, right?
Yeah, I've been doing that for about 10 years.
Yeah, that's cool. Nice. So, wire on a harp has a certain sound that's so different than nylon or gut. I've had people tell me, oh, it's like reminds me of fairies, or it's so magical, or it's so healing. Any thoughts on?
Yeah,
the healing aspect?
I use it to heal myself. I mean, a few years ago, I was in a rather bad car accident, and I remember just sitting in a chair and hardly able to move, and I couldn't pick up even my smallest harp at 3 pounds because I was hurt. But I was looking at that instrument, and it was as if it was reaching to me and saying, well, pretend you're playing me. Imagine you're playing me. And I sat in the chair and closed my eyes, and I started imagining that I was playing. And 2 things happened. One, it gave me an inspiration to let's get back to this. Let's continue working on healing. And then the other thing was that all that practicing I did in my head actually paid off. I would practice in my head tricky bits and, this or that piece or an exercise that I wasn't getting right before. And once I was able to pick the harp up and put it on my lap, I just did it. So, the harp, the harp can be, the wire-strung harp especially, I know a lot of healers that use it to, go to a person and play for someone who's hurt or ill. But I think we could give more credit to the harp for what it does for us as the players.
Wow, Cynthia Cathcart, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was great talking with you, and
thank you.
It's so great listening to your music. If you want to purchase some of this music or find out more about Cynthia, we have included links in the show notes, the website and YouTube, and where you can purchase the music. And thank you again for being here. This was so cool.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
If you have questions about this podcast, guest suggestions, if you'd like to sponsor this podcast, please email me, openingtheharpchakra@yahoo.com. Also links to PayPal and Venmo if you'd like to contribute, support the production of this adventure. And please subscribe, please share, please tell your friends. In the coming weeks, more beautiful harp music from around the world. I'm Jay Michaels. Thank you very much. Peace. Namaste.